In a world where entertainment is viewed as mindless diversion, only good for momentary distraction, one podcast has taken a stand, thoughtfully engaging the art of our day, dissecting the narrative, and pointing the people back to the greatest storyteller of all. You are about to enter a new world, and you will never view entertainment in the same way again. This is Popcorn Theology.
Welcome, movie lovers and theology nerds, to Popcorn Theology, where we examine films for where they align with the greatest story and our greatest storyteller, discussing what to receive, reject, and redeem for common ground, fruitful conversation, and mindful movie consumption. I'm David.
And I'm James, and welcome back to another series of our discussions in the lobby. As a reminder, these are part of the exclusive content for our premium seating patron saints, and we greatly appreciate their support. It's because of you guys that we keep this show going and keep expanding into new territory, as with this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. These have been a lot of fun to do, kind of a chance to break from our usual pattern of diving deeply into one movie or franchise or one show and discuss things a bit more broadly, more topically. And so this first episode is going to be available publicly. So please share it. And if you enjoy what you, please consider supporting us on Patreon. So you can become a patron saint. And for premium seating members, you get access to all of the rest of the episodes that follow. So I just want to encourage you to do that. But as you can see, it's not just me and James here. We are blessed with an excellent group, our panel of educators, as we go back to school in the lobby series. And so
just like Rodney Dangerfield.
There we go. Oh, man. So we got Jam and Bridget. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Of course. So I was going to say, Jam, we know who you are at this point. Yeah. But Bridget, we got a new face and voice on the show. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your connection to education, film, theology, whatnot?
Sure. So my name is Bridget Freiler, and I have been a public high school English teacher I will be starting my 17th year this coming fall as an English teacher. So very excited about that. I went to public high school as a student, went all through a public school system, and actually my first job was teaching at the same high school that I graduated from. I currently work at a different school district now and still in the same area. I still live in the same county that I grew up in. I've always been a movie fan. So I said before, I'm a child of the 90s. So I grew up in a time where we didn't have cable TV. So we had, like the antennas on top of our TV where we got 3 stations if we were lucky. So my family was very much a movie family. And so my love of cinema goes back basically as long as my lifetime does. So it's been really great to find this podcast, and now to get to be a part of it is just incredible. So very excited about that.
Thanks so much for joining us.
As the child of a public school teacher who is also a Christian, thank you.
Of course. It has its challenges, that's for sure, as I'm sure you know as well. My mom also was a public school teacher as well, so I have the child thing going on too. But it's a very rich mission field, that is for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we greatly appreciate your service there. I feel like that seems appropriate to say to teachers, right? A bit of a war zone at times, especially at the high school level. So I'm curious, in Pennsylvania, would you say that you're in the city, kind of in town, or like way out in the sticks?
I live in a very small town. So the first school that I started out is the school that I graduated from, approximately 1,000 to 1,200 students in the building. And the school where I teach at now is actually quite a bit smaller than that. We have grades 8 through 12 in the building and about 475 students across those 5 grade levels. So small, but not, single room farmhouse small. So we're right in the middle.
Not Little House on the Prairie. Small,
right. Yeah.
Good stuff. And so, obviously we had Bridget on because she's an educator, and this is something we've actually been talking about for a while, is some of the way that you've incorporated discussion of film into your classroom. And we're going to sort of table a bit of that for a later part of this discussion. But I figured it would be worth elaborating on why the rest of us are here. And so we all have some sort of connection and kind of a different venue and different area to education. And so I'm a college professor. I've taught for 10 years, college level science, mostly biology. And so that's my connection. I've also done some youth ministry. And James and Jam, why don't you fill us in a little bit about, your backgrounds for those who don't know.
You want me to go, James?
Sure.
Okay. So I teach 5th grade at a classical Christian school. And so I've been teaching 4th grade for 2 years. Before that, I substituted for 2 years in the public school and taught all grade levels. That's where I'm at with education right now.
All right. Well, and then also on the campus side, right?
So yes and no. We have community groups, and our community group, the one that I led, was focused on college ministry. And so we did a lot of outreach, a whole lot of free speech zone. I would preach the gospel. We'd get a lot of people to come and interact in conversation and stuff like that. So we did do stuff like that, but it wasn't like an official campus ministry kind of thing. It was more so a ministry out of the church where we tried to reach the campus, since Morgantown has 30,000 residents, and then 30,000 plus come in every single year just for WVU. And so we wanted to make sure we were reaching the campus, especially because WVU, we look at it almost like an Ephesus. It's a port city. With WVU bringing in tons of people, we quite literally have the nations coming to us so we can preach the gospel, and then they go take the gospel to the nations. And so we wanted to be very intentional about reaching college students. And so that's kind of what our ministry looked like at.
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to say college towns, especially small-ish college towns, whether your church is explicitly or not tied to a campus, there's going to be campus connections there. That's really exciting stuff. James, obviously, you all know and love, but a little bit more about your background, if you don't mind.
I'm just happy to be here. You guys are the formal educators. Yes, I have 20 years in ministry at this point. The first 10 years was with a large church. Now I'm with a church north of Seattle, but it's always been kind of, we have a very transient population, and I remember doing a film and theology event on the movie Inception down in at our church nearest the University of Washington campus, and so tons of college students. So I have been blessed to interact with, whether it's teaching on film and theology or whether it's just being in church circumstances where, of course, now I preach weekly. So there's a lot of preaching, very close to teaching, that goes on, and then a lot of teaching and education, and also even hosting and teaching on both film and theology is just doing events with film, but also teaching in theory on what, why, and how to do film and theology. And so definitely blessed to have done that in a number of different ways, and see fruit and growth, and people taking what I've learned and having fun with it themselves. So definitely
Absolutely.
a good time.
And if nothing else, he's a textbook author, right? Because I think I've heard of some classes using this as one of their assigned readings, right? Synagogue.
I have occasionally in a number of things. I was really blessed. Actually, Reformed Youth Ministries, which is a large organization, actually just handed it out to all of their youth ministers at their annual conference. And so,
all right,
that was kind of an exciting thing, just to see, not just that it's getting out there, but getting into the hands of people who are teaching youth and the upcoming next generation. So that was kind of an exciting tidbit when the director's cut of the book came out, that I got to partner up with them and have it be a free gift at conventions around the country. So that's very
James,
cool.
I actually just suggested using your book at our school to start a film and theology class and use your book as the textbook. So,
awesome!
Just suggested that. I don't know if it'll happen this year, but I did just suggest it.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Well, I was going to say, this is an ad-free video, but I'm going to go ahead and throw an unofficial ad in here for Synagogue Director's Cut. There may be a link in the description if I remember to put it in there, but if not, you can check it out at synagogue.com. And yeah, highly recommend. Excellent book. Like you said, this is the book that essentially inspired Richard and I to start the podcast and to get to where we are now, and then eventually to rope James into being one of our leading hosts. And so, I think what you said about education is so important. It's if we think of it as a tree, I mean, there's branching to it, right? And so you may influence only one person's life, but if that person goes on to influence 2 more, or 3 more, 5 more, it just grows. It's exponential. It's really remarkable that the Lord allows us to play a role in not only the redemptive story of sharing the gospel, but also of discipling others and helping to frame them and shape them for a life of service and of worship. And so that's one of the things that we really wanted to explore. But this series is going to be kind of a little all over the board, because we're going to talk about education kind of in general, how it's portrayed in film and TV, and then also the theology behind education. And then also, as we get a little bit later, we're going to dive into some of the sort of tips and strategies for teaching people how to consume mindfully. This actually pairs really well with our July series on kids movies, which those have been released over the last 4 weeks. By the time this drops, you can hear more from Jam as well as our other co-hosts, Miles and Eric, on that. We got 3 dads talking about how to help their kids engage with entertainment in a way that brings God glory. Super encouraging stuff. So we're going to start this one out maybe a little differently than we have in the past. I wanted to dive into sort of the way education is portrayed in film, the way teachers and students are portrayed, and then kind of more on the popcorn side at this stage, kind of diving into the good, the bad, and the ugly, if you will, of education in film. We wanted to ask the question, what are some movies or shows that kind of do a poor job illustrating it, or maybe they portray values that aren't friendly to the Christian worldview? And then also, what are some movies that really do a great job portraying the role of teachers, the role of students? And so I'm curious what jumps out to you guys in terms of, maybe we'll start with the negative. It's more fun to start negative and end positive. You guys have any ideas for pretty tough to watch or pretty cringy education movies or teaching movies?
Well, I'll kick one off with, maybe it's easy and maybe it doesn't even count, but Ferris Bueller's Day Off is a pretty good way to start. Because the whole premise is school is something that's supposed to be skipped. Yeah, it is something that's terrible. It is something that you need to get out of there. And in fact, then you see even the authority figure, right? The principal is just this horrible person, or at least portrayed as you're supposed to hate this character.
It's so comically horrible. It's so fun to watch.
But yeah. So it is a very fun movie to watch. Like I don't think it's cringy at all. It's a ton of fun. But when you get below the surface, you're like, all right, it's really a bad precedent to give to a young mind that's not formed and can't enjoy something in ways that are fun or irony or, yes, I've felt that way, but like it's not a good way to just start somebody off on, hey, this is what school's about.
Yeah, I would say along that same vein, there was like essentially a whole rash of movies. Basically, any movie about college that's aimed at high school and college students is usually pretty rough. There's everything from Fast Times at Ridgemont High to Animal House to Van Wilder, and several other old school. Several other movies in that vein are comedic because they're pointing at the tropes and honestly giving people pretty weird perceptions of what college is like, and ultimately framing in some ways what college would end up being like for some of them.
Yeah, I think in general, I think Hollywood has a problem with how to portray teachers, especially. In talking about Ferris Bueller, we look at the principal and he's supposed to be the guy in charge of this school, but think even about the teacher in that movie, the one teacher we get to see, and all we ever see him do is say, Bueller. Yeah. When is he teaching? When does he realize that Ferris is absent and he can continue with his class? So I think it's very interesting that, and again, we all know that a lot of these movies are made for purposes of comedy, or maybe portraying the teacher is not necessarily the point of the film. But I think Hollywood tends to go to one extreme or the other. We either have the awful buffoonish kind of educator, or we have the educator who is capable of taking 36 delinquents who are now saved by the end of the story, and she changed every single one. And I think that portrayal is not necessarily helpful, also because of how unrealistic it is. I find that the daily ins and outs of teaching definitely are somewhere in the middle of those two things, and Hollywood is not great at that nuance.
It's true. It does seem to be a little inspirational, almost in like the faith-based film kind of way of like, I bet everything's going to turn around and work out really great by the end. Yay, it did.
Right.
Plenty of stuff in that category. And also, as James mentioned earlier, in case anyone is confused, this is not us reviewing the Rodney Dangerfield film Back to School. That I didn't even know was a thing until I watched the trailer last night, and woof. So we're not doing that one, but it is a good one. Eric George actually listed that, and he said, it's a spoof on a lot of the Heart of Gold stories. And I think I might be mixing up my titles here because there's another one that came to mind, High School High, that he mentioned, and that's the one I believe with Don Lovitz in it. Which gotta love both of those actors, but in terms of their portrayal of what school is like, maybe not the most positive. Another interesting show that came out recently, starring I want to say his name is Glenn Howerton from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, a show called AP Bio. I think it was the show that he kind of stepped out of Always Sunny to do. And he's playing very much the same character, incredibly bitter about everything. And he's teaching high school students biology. I didn't really invest too much time into it because it didn't look like he was, it looked like it was in the same type of comedic vein as the other, which is not exactly uplifting. So I didn't end up spending too much energy on that. But I was curious what you guys think. What about the movie Billy Madison? I'm curious, would we say that is, obviously it's comedy. I would say it's obvious that it's comedy gold. I guess he grows in the process. He learns. The teacher is, romantically involved with the student, though, in an elementary school, so that's not okay.
Yeah.
Context is key there, though, David. He's a
rip that out.
full-grown man that's engaged with that teacher.
That's fair. It's interesting what you said, though, Bridget. This is actually making me stop and think a little bit about it. It's like we do kind of have this false dichotomy of either the teacher is abysmal, or either it's Ben Stein and Bueller, or it's Jesus.
Right.
And it's the teacher that can change everybody. So and maybe the problem is here. We're obviously mining a lot of comedy out of the gate. So comedy should never be our comedy is usually mining stereotypes. And so I think that's one of those dangers of if untrained minds are getting their sense of what things are actually like from comedy. I love Community, and there are some aspects of that
How
sitcom.
did that not make the list?
Oh yeah, no.
Gold.
As someone who went to community college for years.
Were you like Pierce? You were there for 12 years?
It wasn't not quite 6 seasons in a movie, but there are foibles and faults within every education system that, it's fun to pick on those. But if I let those cement or create in me a sense of bitterness or pride or any sort of attitude, it's like that's the whole idea of letting an untrained mind or an untaught mind absorb these things as kind of what they being accurate portrayals. Like that's probably the most dangerous thing. Like you can have ugly portrayals and we can laugh at them because they sort of represent the worst. But if I start making those in my head the norm, that's a huge problem.
Right.
One thing that comes to mind is like Harry Potter. Every single Harry Potter movie, the defense against the dark arts teacher is the one that's coming against Harry in some way, somehow. And what the movie and the series sort of portrays, especially with the decline of Dumbledore towards the end, is that the teachers don't have it all together. And the way that it's actually framed makes it seem like Dumbledore is a big reason for Voldemort becoming a thing. And then they put Harry and Hermione and Ron on a pedestal. I was actually just joking with the other dean and my headmaster. We were trying to work out our handbook for the year, and I was just joking about the fact that at the end of every single year in Harry Potter, they get points for breaking the rules, even though they break every single code of conduct, and they get points for it, and then Gryffindor wins as a result. And what that ultimately is teaching is go and do what you think is right, regardless of consequences or regardless of what may or may not be morally correct. And there's a constant war against teacher and students within that entire series.
I think predominantly, the student is smarter than the teacher. That's one of my fundamental problems with the Harry Potter series. And also, I never read the books, so I'm not quite the fan. Some people are, but so I like to pick on it. I confess. But I think that's endemic to a lot of storytelling now. Is that the student, the kids are right, and it's like, well, that definitely puts the whole idea of education in a bad light.
Yeah. Well, that's Disney sitcom, isn't it? That's the kid is always right, and the dad is the idiot, and the mom's the one holding everything together. And that can go as far as a lot of the times in the Disney sitcoms, you do have kids in school, and that's even the case with the teacher. we're in the bad, but one thing that immediately came to mind thinking about that is Mr. Feeney, Boy Meets World. Like, he was the voice of reason within that show.
I'm glad you mentioned that, yeah.
And it was to the point where, you know, those characters, even after they grew up, were going to Feeney for advice and help and things like that. And I was
not
even
just to keep them in the show.
Yeah. I was even just thinking about, I'm moving up to 5th grade this year, and I've been joking with my headmaster about me being Feeney. Just let me Feeney them the entire time. I'll go all the way through school with them. But to have, like, that show is almost countercultural to the culture's understanding and idea of what a student-teacher relationship looks like, or a kid and adult relationship, because that show does a great job at honoring Feeney as a man, as a professor, as a sounding voice of wisdom and reason for these kids, and they respect and honor him and want to go that way. And then you see a lot of other things like Napoleon Dynamite comes to mind, or Superbad, right? Like, you see these kids just going their own way despite, you know, potential teachers and things like that.
Yeah. We hope you enjoyed this first episode of our In the Lobby series. To watch future episodes, click the link in the description to support us on Patreon and become a patron saint. Subscribe on YouTube for more content, follow and interact on social media to share with others, and remember, you are not a mindless consumer.